Hey guys, this is Rachel with Cypress Textiles, and today we're going to be making the Whirlpool Galaxy Square Hexagon from the 2022 VVCAL. So I've already got a slip knot on my hook, and I'm ready to chain 3 and slip stitch in the 3rd chain from the hook to make my ring. And I'm going to make puff stitches directly into my ring today. So I'm gonna just elongate my loop a little bit so it can accommodate a puff stitch, and then just make a regular puff stitch. So yarn over, insert your hook, pull up a loop, yarn over, insert your hook, pull up a loop, and then last one, yarn over, insert your hook, and pull up a loop. I like to do my puff stitches with 3 times going into the center, or going into the stitch or the space, because I just like that amount of fullness, and going 4 times can make it too full, and then anything less is just not full enough. So now we're gonna chain 2 and then make a puff stitch. Okay, 2 and 3, and then draw the yarn through all the loops and chain 2. And you're just going to repeat this until you have 6 puff stitches and 6 chain 2 spaces. All right, so I have 6 puff stitches, and I'm just going to join into this top chain right above the first puff stitch with a slip stitch. Okay, and now we're going to our next round with 2DC, chain 1, 2DC in the same chain space. So just go in with the beginning DC, single crochet, chain 1. Now make a regular DC, chain 1, and 2DC in the same chain space. And then chain 1. And now we're going to do that for our repeat. 2DC, chain 1, 2DC in the same chain space, chain 1. Okay. So that's how we're looking so far. I'll show you how it looks when it's finished. Okay, so here's how it looked, and don't forget to make your chain 1 in between your 2DC, chain 1, 2DC little corners here. Don't forget each one has a chain 1 in between. All right, so I've got my final chain 1 here, and I'm ready to join into my first stitch. So I'll just go into the chain of the beginning DC and make my slip stitch join. And now to start round 3, we're going to slip stitch in the next stitch. And then we're going to make a 4DC cluster, a beginning 4DC cluster, I should say, in the first chain space. So just go in with a single crochet and chain 1, and then make a 3DC cluster. So yarn over, insert your hook and pull up a loop, draw the yarn through 2 loops on the hook 3 times, and you're going to have 4 loops on your hook. So draw the yarn through all 4 loops, and that's your 4DC cluster, your very first one of the round. So now we're going to chain 3, and then in the next chain space you're going to make a puff stitch. So just go ahead and yarn over and insert your hook and pull up your loop 3 times in that space for your puff stitch, and then draw the yarn through all the loops, if I can get it, the very last one. There we go. All right, now chain 3. Okay, and in our next chain space we're going to make a 4DC cluster. Yarn over, insert your hook and pull up a loop, draw the yarn through 2 loops on the hook, and do that 4 times in that same chain space, and you've got your 4DC cluster. You'll have 5 loops on the hook, draw the yarn through all 5 loops, and chain 3. And we're just going to repeat this around. So your 4DC cluster is going to go in where your stitches here make a V, and then your puff stitch is going to go in this chain 1 that was in between. Okay, so just make sure that you chain 3, and then you can start your next stitch. Okay, so I'm going to show you how this looks, and then I'll show you how it looks when it's all done. Okay, so now I am ready to join, and I've got my 3 chains on the hook here, and I'm ready to do slip stitch join in this first 4DC cluster. So I'm going to grab all the loops that I used for my cluster, all those 4 loops I have from the beginning, and then slip stitch. All right, and now I'm ready to start with the next round, which is a super simple 5 single crochet in every chain space. All right, so just 5 singles in every chain space around, and then join with a slip stitch in your first single. Okay, so here's how our round looks, and I've already joined with a slip stitch in the first single crochet. So the next thing I'm going to do is slip stitch in the next stitch, and then I'm ready to do my single crochet in the next stitch, chain 4, and then skip 4, single crochet, chain 4, skip 4, single crochet, chain 4, and that's going to be our repeat all the way around. Okay, so I have my chain 4 chain spaces here, and I'm ready to make 5 single crochet in my first chain space for my second to last round. So do 5 single crochet, and then we're going to make a puff stitch in the next chain space. Chain 1, puff stitch in the same chain space, chain 1, another puff stitch, same chain space, chain 1, and last time puff stitch in the same chain space and chain 1. All right, and I will say, so I have here my 5 single crochet, and then puff stitch, chain 1, puff stitch, chain 1, puff stitch, chain 1, puff stitch, chain 1. So I don't chain 1 before my first puff stitch, because when you go from a regular stitch to a puff stitch, once you make a puff stitch, you get like this fake chain before. So if you chain 1 here before you make your puff stitch, it's going to look like a chain 2 space, because the puff stitch kind of makes its own chain that it has going on. So that's why you don't see in the chart a chain space here if you're going on the website and you're looking at the chart. And in the instructions, there's no chain space before the first puff stitch, even though there's one after it, because after there's no fake chain 1, so you've got to make the chain 1 there. All right, so now we're going to do 5 single crochet in the next chain space. All right, so I've got my 5 single crochet, and I'm going to just repeat my puff stitch, chain 1, oops, that's not a puff stitch, chain 1 4 times in the next chain space. Okay, so that's how I have it so far. I'm going to do a couple more puff stitches here, and then I'm going to work my way around, and I'll show you how that looks when it's done. Okay, so I'm done with my round here, and that round is hard work with all the puff stitches, but I think it comes out to be worth it because they're so cute. Okay, so in our next stitch, we're going to start our next round with a single crochet, and this is our last round, so we're just going to make 84 single crochet. So in the first 4 singles, go ahead and make a single crochet, and then in the mock chain 1 space before the puff stitch that I told you about before, make 1 single crochet as well. And now we're going to make 2 singles in the next chain 1 space. And now we're at our corner, make 3 singles. And then on the next chain 1 space, 2 single crochet, and then in the next chain 1 space, 1 single crochet. And now you're almost at your repeat, just basically starting into your next repeat, do 1 single crochet in the next 5 stitches. All right, so I'm going to back up and show you again. So you're going to have single crochet in all these 5 stitches here, and then you're going to have 1 in the faux single crochet space that's before the first puff stitch, and then 2 in the next space, 3 in the next space, 2 in the next space, and 1 in the next chain 1 space, because remember we did make a chain 1 there, and then 5 singles. So when you add all that up, when you get around, make sure you have 84 single crochet. I have this one that's finished, and you can see that I've got my hexagon space, but it looks a little like has a dip right here because I still need to finish weaving in my yarn. But otherwise, this has been the Whirlpool motif from the 2022 VVCAL, and I will see you guys on the next one.